Game on! So, in the last episode, I was talking about Copa, as well as I ended by talking about Dungeons and Dragons, and that's where we're going to start this episode. Because along with the barbarian that I have, who has a magic axe who talks to him, it's basically Stormbreaker from from what's it called, Endgame, where he can throw it and have it come back to him. I mean, it's their first time playing Dungeons and Dragons, and maybe it was too OP for me to just give him this kick-ass weapon. But I mean, it is powerful, and I want him to feel empowered. I want him to have options and feel like he can do stuff that's really cool in the heat of the moment. So that's why I gave it to him. And then I played through with his stuff. My next character that I'm playing through, because I'm doing all their backstories, like kind of a one-on-one session where I teach them the rules and kind of set up their backstory and what they want to accomplish in their life and kind of what their flaws and everything. What he is a... If you know The Witcher, he's basically a Witcher. I'm using the Matt Mercer class, which is the Blood Hunter. And basically, I'm just using it as a Witcher, which is what it is. And it's like, you have special abilities, and you are set to hunt monsters, and you are hunting a vampire. And because he wanted to play as a vampire. So I'm like, no, you're going to be a human. I'll just turn you into a vampire. So he's going through, and he's just arrived at a tower, and he's gone shoved into the basement. And found a pit of holy water, yada yada yada. He's just kind of going through it. This is the level which I hate. I also don't think I skipped anything there, unless like my start button is jammed. I didn't press any buttons. But he starts off, and I'm like, alright, you're smart. What do you want to do? So he looks around. He actually sets up for night to see if anyone shows up at the tower, which is a smart idea. Like, I would do that. We kind of made fun of him for choosing to fight a vampire at night when it's kind of obvious that vampires are stronger at night. Oh dear, don't want to fall in the pit. So, I mean, it's all in fun, but it's gonna be interesting to see what he does. So, he's going to fight the vampire. He's then going to get bit. But he kind of searches around, and he's going to get a stick to sharpen it. That way he has a wooden pike to kill the vampire with. So he's going through, and I'm like, okay, roll survival check to find a stick that's long enough to work as like a spear, then carve it. And he rolls a natural 1, which is basically an automatic failure if you don't know the rules of Dungeons and Dragons. If you've never played or never heard of Dungeons & Dragons, I would totally recommend checking it out. It is extremely fun, extremely entertaining. It gives you a lot of freedom if the person running it knows what they're doing. Or if you don't know people or don't have a way to play it, I would recommend watching a show called Critical Role. It's available on YouTube or in podcast form, and it's just a bunch of famous voice actors playing Dungeons & Dragons. And the stories they go through are awesome, and it inspires me to kind of create this world and play and make my game as good as possible. So, he's in the basement. He finally finishes killing this twig blight, because it's a natural 1, I have to make it interesting. He takes the sticks from its body, carves it into a pike, and then I explain how there's leaves padded around the ground. Because I'm like, okay, there's going to be a trap. And I'm like, you would probably be able to deduce the fact that there's going to be a trap. Roll investigation. And he rolls a natural 20. So I'm like, alright, you look, there's no other way in, but there are leaves that are purposely placed and padded down on the floor around the building. And he has this little gleam in his eye, and he's like, oh, there's leaves padded down. And they're placed purposely. Meaning that the vampire obviously walks out the front door. I'm like, that is not... I don't know how you took that from what I said and the slightest, but okay. Sure, I'm not going to correct you. You have to believe what you believe. Um, so that was funny, because then he immediately walked out onto the front steps, and I just tried to use Eagle Vision from Hitman. That's funny. He walks out onto the front steps and immediately falls through the pile of leaves into a basement dungeon where he finds other peasants locked up being used as food for this vampire. So since I know the backstory of the vampire and how they became a vampire, and my story is that they were a druid who prayed to the god of nature and got turned into a vampire, but she still wants to she's still religious. She still believes in God and prays to her God, believing that her God can turn her back into a human. So part of her shrine, there's a large pool of holy water in front of this kind of her religious symbol. So I mean, it's kind of my way of saying, hey, by the way, you have nothing to kill this vampire. Here's holy water. So he grabs a vial of holy water, uses it. He's carrying it with him, but he keeps being. Now that I had he tried to break off a limb of a tree and it attacked him. Now he's so skeptical about everything, which was not my intention. But he's like, yeah, but the trees came to life, so obviously this is a trap, and these guys are evil, and blah, 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 blah. We spent like a good 30 minutes in a room as he tries to... he pokes everything with a stick, seeing what is alive. Which is funny. So then he heads upstairs, and he's in a kitchen, and he has potted plants everywhere, which are more twig blights. Because initially I didn't plan for him to fight twig blights out in the forest. I initially meant for him to fight it in the tower here. But as soon as he saw these trees and potted plants, he's like, I get out my tinderbox, I start a fire, and I light them both on fire. I'm like, okay, just give me a sec. I need to check how much damage fire damage is. Or how much damage fire does. And since it's fire super effective on them because they're literally trees, it burns them alive and does double damage and immediately kills both of them because he rolled really high on damage. And then he goes through and he finds that there's like knives and clothes, and it kind of just, there's not much around except for some money which he takes. And then he again spends the rest of the day, being another 30 minutes reluctantly searching the building. I keep trying to get him to head upstairs, but he's like, no, there has to be something here. Going through stuff. And then on the next level is where I'm gonna have him think the vampire sleeps. Because a vampire has super hearing. So my logic is that a vampire probably heard him coming, especially through the fights and him falling through the floor and everything that has happened. The vampire would know that a guy is now there, which means that he wouldn't just sit around in his bed waiting for some guys to show up and kill him. So he has actually been setting up a trap in his bed in the coffin that is on the second floor, so that way when he opens it up, it's going to shoot him. And then he's going to either take damage or take half damage. I want him to take damage from a trap. That way he knows that traps are dangerous and to always be cautious of them. So, I mean, because I feel like Dungeons & Dragons, especially nowadays, don't have enough traps. It's always like because people aren't cautious enough, they kind of just rush into rooms not thinking about the consequences because there's no traps that can, like, deal a lot of damage or instantly kill anyone anymore. Where there are a lot of those in older books. Because I read a lot of the older Dungeons & Dragons books, because you can find them all online. Why isn't he taking damage? So, I want him to know that there are traps. So once he gets shot, the only other option are to take the stairs up to the attic, where he will find the vampire hiding in the shadows, just hanging from the roof, and it'll drop, and it will have a surprise round on him, which will be very useful because then it's teaching him the idea of surprise rounds. Then, once he is about to kill the vampire, I'm going to have it so the vampire charges him and bites him, which is going to turn him into a vampire. I'm then going to have... Oh, his Count Duke is going to keep coming. Once he becomes a vampire, I'm then going to have it so that he kills it and gets a lot of money from killing the vampire. Like, he's going to be able to sell the ashes and everything. Because then his story is that he then can't go back to his, like, a guild of witchers. Because if he goes back, then they're surely going to kill him. That way they can sell his ashes or whatever I decide is the valuable part of a vampire for a lot of money. Also, just as a bounty in general. So, then he's going to have to kind of set off on his own, which is when he's going to meet everyone else and the group's going to get together. That's what I'm thinking about for him. I don't know exactly where it's going to go, but that's kind of where I want it to end up. My other friend, moving on to my other friend, he is a sorcerer. He is a changeling sorcerer. And in my world, to me, it makes sense that changelings would be the type of people who work for brothels. This wasn't the last... That's the last level? It might have actually been the last level. Oh, wow, it was. I didn't even realize I completed the game. I'll just put my controller down for a second. So, he's a changeling, and changelings are the ones that run brothels because it makes sense. They can change so that way they can take any request and make themselves look like that. So, with that idea, I kind of ran with the fact that he wanted to be a changeling. So, talking to him, his mother works in a brothel, and he doesn't know his father because it was just some random guy that she worked with, if you catch my drift. And then since she doesn't have a lot of money, he then became a rogue, being, that's his class. He's then a burglar, robbing people out on the streets. And I kind of just like that idea. So how I'm going to play it is that his mom sleeps with people to get information out of them, and then uses those secrets to send her son, being my friend Kevin, on missions to assassinate them, or rob them, or whatever. And then he goes back. But then I'm going to have the story fall under the fact that she is secretly going to then become blackmailed by kind of the owner of all these brothels. So she's kind of the head honcho, the one in charge, kind of like Littlefinger. And she is going to be a succubus who then blackmails her after finding out that she's been involved with all these murders or robberies, and is going to then blackmail her into serving her. And then it's going to be a quest where then Kevin is probably going to try... He's going to find out that his mom's being basically not paid anymore. It's going to just be kind of like a slavery thing where it's like, I'm blackmailing you for your entire paycheck to work for me. And he's going to try and... I'm then going to set it up so that he can go on the quest to save his mom. And the party member at that point are going to know him and are going to be able to go on the quest with him. And that's probably going to be the first mission. With the vampire guy, just before I forget, and to end off this episode, his mission is going to be that there's someone in the world who can cure vampirism, like the vampiric curse, which will turn him back to a human, which means that he can go back to his guild and go back to living his life. So that's going to be his thing. And then the barbarian is just going to have a cursed item that constantly tells him to kill people, so he's just going to go along for the ride. If he wants a story, I can make something up with him. But anyway, guys, I hope you loved hearing my stories and watching the gameplay. I definitely enjoy recording it, and I will see you guys next time. This is Game Over.